All right, I want to welcome everyone joining us here in person as well as those joining us online. Can we give it up for our online audience this morning? Today, we are jumping into a brand new series this month we're calling Family Function. Family Function. I don't know if you noticed, but this is now officially November. And November is the kickoff to the holiday seasons. It's the holiday season here in America. Yeah, you're going to be engaged in a bunch of family functions in November and December. You've got Thanksgiving happening in the month of November. You got Christmas happening in December. You got New Year's coming up. If there were one word that best described the holiday season, it would be family. Yeah, you're going to spend more time with your family over the next 2 months than you have at any other point in this year. And if you have an amazing family, you are so excited. If you've got one of those families that are full of humility, love abounds in your family, yeah, one of those families where you can talk to them about anything, I want to tell you, good for you. But for the rest of us, as we think about the family functions, all we can think about is the family dysfunction. Yeah, the family dysfunction. In fact, some of us, this time of year is a really difficult time of year for you because you think about the fact that now is the time where I'm going to be around my family and oh God, this is going to be an interesting season. Now, don't get it twisted. We love our families. But we also acknowledge the reality of the fact that our families are oftentimes the source of our greatest frustration. They're oftentimes the source of our greatest pain. In fact, for some of us, our families have been dysfunctional for so long that we wouldn't know function if it came and hit us in the face. We're 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, and we're struggling to have a functional family ourselves because we've never seen what functional looks like. It's never been modeled for us. Now, maybe you would be thinking, hey, family dysfunction, it's a new thing. Came out about the same time as Facebook. Can I tell you something? Family dysfunction is as old as time. In fact, I'm going to show you a dysfunctional family that existed 3,000 years ago. In fact, if you will grab your Bible, let's turn to 2 Samuel chapter 13 before you guys put the scripture up there. I want to give you some context so that you can understand the text at hand. So we're going to talk about today King David. This is the same David that killed Goliath. This is the same David that led Israel. This is the same David that God said, this is a man after my own heart. But one of the things we have a tendency to do as Christians, though, is we elevate his accomplishments and we overlook his failures. But the reality is this, you can't completely understand a man unless you understand their wins and their losses. So today, we're going to look at some of David's losses. In fact, one loss in particular that was a huge loss. Now, I got to give you a little more context so you understand what we're going to read. David had 8 wives. 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. Now, it's hard enough trying to keep one woman happy. How in the world do you keep 8 women happy? Goodness gracious. Not only did David have 8 wives, but he also had a number of concubines. What was a concubine? A concubine was a woman that he was with, that he provided for. However, he was not married to that woman. He was with her, he provided for her, but he wasn't married to her. Now, if you remember last week, I don't remember if it was this service or the last service that I mentioned. Right now, there's a song out on the radio, 250 million views on YouTube. My kids let me listen to it. You got this woman who's talking about the song, girl, I'll have him on the weekend. You can have him on the weekday, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I'll take him on the weekend. Now, in other words, basically what she said is, I'm okay with being a concubine. I'm okay with him not committing to me. In other words, I'm okay with a piece of a man. Ladies, let me tell you, single ladies in here, don't you ever become okay with a piece of a man. In fact, if you are okay with a piece of man, then what that says is you don't really feel like you have much value. And if you call Expansion Church home, I need you to understand you are so valuable. You are worth more, maybe, than you're even living up to right now. Amen? Not only that, before we go into what we're going to read, maybe you're listening to this and maybe you say, see, this is proof that the Bible is for polygamous relationships. I need you to understand that just because the Bible records polygamous relationships does not mean the Bible affirms polygamous relationships. In other words, the Bible records all kinds of stuff. It records murder, but no one would say, the Bible talks about murder, thus it must be okay. No. The Bible, just because the Bible records it doesn't mean it affirms it. All right? Last piece of context, then we're going to read the word, I promise you. Last piece of context. Obviously, because David had so many wives, he obviously had a bunch of kids. He was like Nick Cannon before Nick Cannon. Cam Newton before Cam Newton, okay? And so we're going to read the beginning of 2 Samuel 13. We're going to start at verse number 1, and it's going to talk about 3 of his many, many kids. So here's what it says. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. What is the Bible saying? Okay, remember I told you he had how many wives? 8 wives. One of these wives he had a child with named Amnon. The other wife he had 2 kids with named Absalom and what? It's on the screen. And Tamar. Some of y'all, that was a test. Absalom and Tamar. But notice what it says. They're all brothers and sisters. Amnon fell in love with who? Tamar. With Tamar. Ooh, this is nasty. Look at verse number 2. Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. In fact, he would go on to devise a plan. Here was the plan. The plan was, I'm going to pretend to be sick, and then I'm going to ask my sister to bring me some food in the bed. And when she comes in, I'm going to take advantage of my sister. Look at what happens, verse number 11. But when she took it to him to eat, he grabbed her and he said, come to bed with me, my sister. Now, I know what you're thinking. This ain't real life. This ain't real life. This don't happen in real life. Oh, no. This definitely happens in real life. In fact, I was talking with a brother at a healing retreat that I went to 2 weeks ago, and the brother shared how when he was a young man, his sister would take advantage of him. This happens in real life. So if you're wondering, why we deal with this in church? Why are we talking about this kind of nasty stuff in church? Because nasty stuff happens here. I'm not just talking about out there. Because sometimes, here's what we have a tendency to do. Sometimes we're like, well, the sinners out there sin and do all kinds of stuff, but in the church, we don't do that kind of stuff. Oh, no, nasty stuff happens in the church as well. Look at verse number 21. When King David heard all of this, he was furious. David was mad because he found out that one of his kids took advantage of another one of his kids. He was mad. What do you think he did? Nothing. He did nothing. In fact, he did what in some cases has happened in your family when trauma arises. Instead of doing something about it, what do? You just kind of sweep it under the rug. Just kind of ignore it. Just kind of pretend like it never happened. Let me give you some examples. Maybe your family, you pretended that dad didn't get arrested. You're pretending that mommy isn't abusive. Let's pretend that we didn't lose that house and end up sleeping in our car. Let's pretend. Let's pretend that we didn't lose that child and have a miscarriage. We're just going to pretend, keep it moving. Let's pretend that the police weren't called. We're going to pretend. Let's just sweep it under the rug and kind of keep it moving. In other words, instead of dealing with your dysfunction, what dysfunctional families have a tendency to do is sweep it under the rug and pretend like it never happened. And here's what we know about that. When we sweep things under the rug and we pretend like they never happened, they do not go away. In fact, you become more dysfunctional. So here's what happens to David's kids. Absalom finds out what his brother Amnon did to his sister Tamar. He's upset. So he hatches a plan. Here's the plan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to the countryside. I'm going to tell my dad, King David, that I need him to allow me to take my brother with me. So he says, Daddy, I need you to let me take my brother out there with me. No, not that brother, the other brother. No, not that brother. I got a lot of brothers. The other brother. Amnon, I need you to let him go with me. David allows him to go with him out to the countryside. And then this is what happens in verse number 28. Verse 28. Absalom ordered his men, listen, when Amnon is high on spirits from drinking wine, in other words, when Amnon gets drunk, here's what I want you to do. I want you to strike him down, and I want you to kill him. Don't be afraid. Haven't I given you this order? Be strong and brave. So Absalom's men did to Amnon what Absalom had ordered. In other words, Absalom told them to kill his brother, and they killed his brother. So now you have one brother that has violated the sister, and to get retribution, the other brother kills that brother. Does this sound like a dysfunctional family? Yes. And in some cases, maybe you hear a little bit of your family in this. Maybe it's not as dramatic as this, but maybe there's some elements about your family that are just as dysfunctional as David's family. Could you imagine for a second what Christmas and Thanksgiving would have been like at David's household? Like we all know that this happened. How do we get past this? Yeah, dysfunctional. Here's what I need you to understand. It is impossible for you to come from a dysfunctional family and come out unaffected. It's impossible. In fact, there is nothing that shapes a child more than a dysfunctional family. Now, maybe you think you made it out unharmed. You think you made it out unhealthy. In fact, in some cases, you only compare yourself to other unhealthy people. So you think you're healthy when in actuality, you're unhealthy. In fact, I was having a conversation with my brother recently, and we were talking about this upcoming Thanksgiving. And we were talking about the dysfunction in our family. And he says, man, it's a wonder we made it out of that thing healthy. And I'm like, bro, speak for yourself. Speak for yourself. No. I haven't spent 17 years in counseling because I made it out healthy. Yeah. Pastor, go to counseling? Yes. You should too. Yeah, you should too. Yeah. I haven't dealt with insecurity issues because I made it out healthy. I haven't completed Celebrate Recovery to deal with anger issues and rage issues because I made it out healthy. No. You don't make it out of a dysfunctional family unaffected. In fact, write this down. Who we have become as adults is largely connected to the households and the family situations that we were raised in. Who we become as adults is largely connected to the households and the family situations we were raised in. I know maybe you've told yourself that it didn't impact you. Yes, it did. Sometimes you need to go to counseling so that a counselor can point out to you how it affected you. In fact, let me give you a list. I want to give you a list of some things. These are just a few of them. Some things that dysfunctional families can create on the inside of you. Let me give you a couple of them. Insecurity, poor self-image, defensiveness. Anytime somebody says something to you, you always quick to pop off. Anytime your boss say you late. Now you know you come late to work every single day. Now your boss has said one thing to you, and now you pop off. Defensiveness. Feelings of rejection. Mama rejected you. Daddy rejected you. Didn't give you what you needed. And now you have feelings of rejection. Restlessness. You don't never know how to sit down. You can't stop moving. On my wife's off day, I be telling her you need to sit down. She going everywhere on her off day. Getting her nails done, hair done. I'm like, sit down. Restlessness. Restlessness. You got to learn how to sit down. Here's another one. Here's another one. Feelings of inadequacy. Cold. Maybe you're the type where when you come around, people are like, man, she always mean. He's always mean. Oh, I'll stay away from him. I'll stay away from her. Promiscuous. Feeling worthless. Performance-oriented. Mom and daddy taught you that the only way you could really get love is if you get good grades in school. Or if you're a great athlete on the football field, basketball court. That's the only way you can get love. So then what you do is you work really hard to try to get love and affirmation from mom and daddy, not understanding that you should be loved and affirmed just as you are, even if you got straight F's. Even if you're not great at whatever the sport is. Yeah. Feeling worthless, performance-oriented, overly consumed with appearance. You spend 4 hours in the mirror. Let's move on. Fearfulness, worry, controlling behavior. This is something I struggle with. Here's what you need to understand. When you come from an environment where everything is chaotic, you make a pledge to yourself when you become adult that nothing in your world will be chaotic. So what do? You try to control everything and everybody around you to make sure that there's no chaos in your midst. It's difficult to have a relationship when you operate like that because don't nobody around you want to be controlled. Easily defeated. You get the wind let out of you real easy. Let something happen outside of what you thought it would be. Nothing ever works out my way. I had one lady, and I love her. I probably shouldn't share this. I'm going to share it anyways. I had one lady, I'm out of here, I'm leaving the church. Why are you leaving the church? I prayed that God would send me a man, and then he broke up with me, and I'm done. You're just too easily defeated. Something don't go your way, and now you easily defeated. And withdrawal. Listen to me. If you walked out of an unhealthy, dysfunctional home, it is an impossibility that you walked out of that thing unscathed. So you need to be like a detective on First 48. You need to go back and you need to do some research to figure out where did this stuff come from on the inside of you. You didn't just pop up and become controlling one day. That came from someplace. You didn't just pop up and be promiscuous. That came from someplace. You didn't pop up and have insecurity. That came from someplace. But if you don't go and get counseling, you will think you made it out unscathed, but in the process affecting everybody around you in a negative way. Is anybody getting something out of this? You got to go back. You got to go back. You got to go back. I was reading a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. It's written by a PhD. And what she did was all this research, and I'm going to break it down to you in a nutshell. Here's what she found. She found that if you have an ancestor that at some point in time in their life was enslaved, they learned coping mechanisms to deal with the enslavement. If you have an ancestor that existed under Jim Crow, they learned coping mechanisms to deal with Jim Crow. Those coping mechanisms helped them to survive, but they passed them down to next generation and the next generation and the next generation, and those coping mechanisms are dysfunctional. Let me give you a great example. If we lived on the plantation and I got whipped by the plantation owner, there's no counselor I can go talk to the next day. There's no trauma grief counseling. So what do? I learn I got to keep moving. I got to sweep it under the rug, and I got to keep moving. Sweep it under the rug, got to keep moving. If I grew up in a Jim Crow South and I saw negative things happen to my ancestors, what do I learn? I learned that I got to sweep it under the rug and keep moving. So now that gets passed down from generation to generation to generation. Now you do the same thing. You've got the same dysfunctions that for them were coping mechanisms. But if you can't trace your stuff, then you'll end up living the same stuff that they lived, and it won't work for you. Amen. Are you with me on that? Amen. Now, let me give you some good news. Let me give you some new news, because I give you a lot of bad news. Let me give you some good news. Let me give you some news. Just because you grew up in a dysfunctional household doesn't mean you have to raise your kids in a dysfunctional household. Just because you grew up in a dysfunctional household doesn't mean that, yes, that was your past, but it doesn't have to be your future. Yes, that was your story. That doesn't have to be your kid's story. However, there's a but here. However, the only way you're going to stop it from being their story is you got to get healing from your trauma. If you don't get healing, you're going to pass it down. This stuff is generational. Let me give an example. The Bible says this in Proverbs 13:22. A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children. If you remember, we used that verse a couple of months ago when we were talking about money, because this verse is talking about money. However, what if the greatest inheritance you will ever leave to your kids and your kids' kids is a break in your family dysfunction? In other words, what if you can start something new for the following generations? What if you can leave them a legacy of a healthy family? But it starts with you getting healthy. It starts with you doing the work to figure out some of these dysfunctions that you've adopted in your life. It starts with you. It starts with you. Now, maybe you would say, well, Pastor, fortunately, my kids are grown now. So, how can I go back and fix the damage that I've caused? How can I change my legacy? Can I tell you something? The first thing you need to start with is an apology. An apology. I'm sorry. You would be surprised at how a simple apology to your kids will completely change everything. You'll be surprised what an apology to your kids will do for their soul. And some people, when it comes to parents, in a dysfunctional family, parents never say I'm sorry to their kids. Mama, when I was 7 years old, you shot me. Well, you should have moved out of the way. like dysfunctional families never apologize to their kids, right? Now, here's the thing. Why does this happen? Because in a dysfunctional family, the belief is that if I apologize to my kids, then that's a sign of weakness. You apologizing to your kids is not a sign of weakness. You apologizing to your kids is a sign of strength. And not only is it a sign of strength, but it's breaking the dysfunction. Because if you don't learn how to apologize to your kids, they're not going to apologize to their kids. And then their kids are going to apologize to their kids. And it's going to keep the dysfunction going generation after generation after generation. You need to apologize. I'm sorry. The old folks used to say, when you know better, you do better. You know better, you do better. They didn't know you didn't know any better. You didn't know any better. I'm sorry. I could have been a better mother. I'm sorry. I could have been a better father. I could have done more. I was out working, doing the best I knew how. My dad told me before he passed away, he said, there was a time where I kind of began to share with him some of the things he missed in my life. And one of the things he said to me was, my dad died when I was 8 years old. Now, he didn't say, I'm sorry, but that was his way of saying, I'm sorry. And just that one sentence, it impacted my soul. sometimes all your kids need is a I'm sorry. Yeah. Now, let me give you a little more bad news. A little more bad news. Now, maybe you're thinking Thanksgiving's coming up, and I'm just going to go fix everybody. I'm going to go fix everybody. Pastor done said this. I'm finna go call a meeting with grandma and granddaddy, and I'm finna lay it out. Okay? Okay, listen to me. Write this down. We can't go back and fix the families we came from. We can't go back and fix the families we came from. Now, can God fix the dysfunction in your family? Absolutely. But here's the question I have for you. Can you love them even if God chooses not to fix them? That's the real question. Can you love them for who they are as opposed to getting upset with them for who you think they should be? Yeah. We can't go back and fix the families we come from. Here's another thing. You can't expect your family to give you now as an adult what they didn't give you when you were a child. I'm going to give you a perfect example. I was talking to a brother not too long ago, and he had a scar on his face from here all the way down to his mouth. Now, the only time I've ever seen brothers with scars like that is when I would go in and do prison ministry. I'd never seen that on the outside. It was kind of like a unicorn. I had never seen that on the outside, okay? So I'm thinking to myself, maybe it's not what I think it is, because I'm talking to the brother, and he don't sound hood. You know what I'm saying? So I got to know him a little bit better, and he said to me, he says, hey, so I grew up in the projects in New York. And he said, I lived in a big building, several stories high. And he said, I had a younger brother, and my younger brother had got into something with some guys, and I jumped into the fight and to protect my younger brother. And he said, I thought it was over. I thought it was over and done with. He said, a week later, I was behind the building. It was nighttime. He said, this brother jumped out of the dark with a blade in his hand, slashed my face wide open. So he says, the guy took off running. He says, I took off running, but my face is completely open. Blood is coming down. He says, I run into the building. He says, I'm dripping blood everywhere. Blood is going everywhere on the floor. I get into the elevator, and I'm thinking to myself, if I could just get to my mom, if I can just get to my mother, everything will be all right. And so he says he gets up to his floor, he gets off the elevator, goes to his apartment, and he walks in, and he's like, Mom. Mind you, his face is completely open. And his mom says, didn't I tell you not to be out there at nighttime? His mom said, I ain't got time for this. No. I ain't got time for this. So he says he leaves his house. He goes down to another apartment. This woman at the apartment takes him to the hospital and gets him stitches. He says, listen, I've never felt so rejected in my life. He says, look, now my mom, who's in her 70s, now she's trying to do the things for me that she didn't do when I was a teenager. And he says, honestly, it feels kind of weird. Why? Because the reality is you can't go back or expect your family to go back and give you what they didn't give you when you were a child. You're an adult. You need something different now from them. Yeah. Now, here's the reality. Every dysfunctional family has these things called unspoken rules. If you come from a dysfunctional family, you know this to be true. They're unspoken in that you don't have to actually open your mouth and share what the rule is. But everybody in the house instinctively knows that it's a rule. In fact, if you don't know it's a rule, try breaking it. Everybody in the family is going to make it very clear to you that you just broke a rule. Why? Because it's going to create tension in the house. Let me give you an example of some of these unspoken rules of a dysfunctional family. Number one, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Yeah, there was trauma. Yeah, you were violated, but we're not going to talk about that. Yeah, the money. Yeah, we stole the money, but we're not gonna talk about that. Yeah, I hurt you. I did, but we're not gonna talk about that. We're just gonna sweep it under the rug and we just gonna kind of keep it moving. Here's the second one. Don't feel. Why you always crying? You always crying. We ain't got time to be crying. We gotta move on. That happened 10 years ago. Why you still crying about that? We gotta move on. In dysfunctional families, there's no room to feel. Here's another one. Don't rock the boat. In other words, we live in a world of dysfunction. Don't you go trying to inject reality into our craziness. I remember when I left home to go to college, and then I would come back and have conversations with my family, and they would be like, oh, now you a college boy now, huh? Now you smart. Now you smart, huh? What were they saying? Don't rock the boat. No. We've been living like this for a long time. Don't inject reality in it. Here's the last one. Don't trust. You're taught in a dysfunctional family, no one can be trusted. The only person you can trust is you. So now you become an adult, and now you're married, and your spouse can't figure out why you never trust them. You never trust them because you learned early on, don't trust anybody. And so what we're going to do is, each week, we're going to deal with one of these unspoken rules that dysfunctional families have. The one we're going to deal with quickly today, I got 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Everybody say 8 minutes. We're going to do this in 8 minutes. The one we're going to deal with today is the first one, don't talk about it. Everybody write that down. Don't talk about it. If you come from a dysfunctional family, you are told, do not talk about our imperfections. Don't talk about our trauma. Don't talk about or deal with stuff that happened when we were in our childhood. You got to grow up. You got to move on. We don't talk about it. In fact, here's one of the things that dysfunctional families do. Dysfunctional families traffic in secrets. It's all about secrets. Like, Ray has no clue that ain't his daddy. Like, am I lying? This stuff happens. Real life. Ray, 40 years old, still think that's his daddy. Now, everybody in the family knows that's not his daddy. The only person that doesn't know is Ray. Yeah, he the only one that don't know. Secrets. Everybody in the family knows that this one family member has an addiction. When the family member comes around, you instinctively hide everything in the house. TV gone, microwave gone. Y'all ain't got no microwave? No, we eat the food cold. We just eat our food cold. You don't even have to talk about it. It just instinctively happens. Amen. Right? Instead of us dealing with the issue, what do? We make adjustments for the dysfunction. Here's another one. Everybody in the family knows that something inappropriate happened between those two people in the family. In fact, one of them was never the same after this occurrence. But we don't have time to deal with that. We don't want to talk about that. That's going to cause disruption. Let's just sweep it under the rug, ignore it, and let's just keep on moving. You see, dysfunctional families traffic in secrets. But here's what I need you to understand. Satan always hides in the dark. Satan always hides in the dark. The only way that you're going to make your dysfunctional family functional is you got to turn the lights on. Now, maybe you've never lived in a house with roaches. But if you've ever, nobody in here. But what I heard from some people is that when you live in a house with roaches, when you turn the lights on, what do the roaches do? They scatter. In the same way, when it comes to your life, well, you got to turn the lights on and Satan will flee. But as long as you allow there to be darkness in your house, in your family, Satan will hide in the darkness and he will continue to do a mighty work to create dysfunction. And you got to turn the lights on. You got to turn the lights on. So the question that I have for you is this. What secrets have you been carrying? What secrets have you been carrying? I just messed up somebody's Thanksgiving. Because somebody gonna go to Thanksgiving. Y'all remember when that money was missing? Uncle Tommy stole that money. He stole that money. Yes, he did. He stole that money. Yeah, what secrets has your family been hiding? Yeah, Satan hides in dark places. I'm gonna tell y'all a little story, a family story. It's about my wife. I'm gonna move over here. I'm gonna talk to this side over here. My wife, her family lives in Alabama, and so we went to Alabama a couple years ago to visit her family. And here we are, we're in the living room. We're having a great time with the family. She's got a great family. But even good families got a little bit of dysfunction. Come on, somebody. And so we're in this room, and they introduced us to this older man sitting in the room. And we're like, hey, Mr. Older Man, nice to meet you. Right? And so everybody's sitting, laughing, having a good time. And all of a sudden, her aunt was sitting there quiet. And all of a sudden, she stood up and she said, I can't take this no more. Everybody's like, what? She said, I'm sick of secrets. I'm sick of it. Now, we have no clue where this is going. She says, Shaterica, this is your granddaddy. Granddaddy, this is Shaterica. Go hug your granddaddy. Now, we didn't even know she had a granddaddy. It was a secret that had been held within the family for a long time. And there were a lot of people in the family that knew that this was the case. My wife just didn't know that this was the case. So here we are. We got an episode of Medea happening. This is your granddaddy. That literally is what came to my mind the moment it happened. In the moment, I'm trying to keep a straight face, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Here's another point. Dysfunctional families learn how to play pretend. Dysfunctional families learn how to play pretend. Going back to the story of David. David could have quickly swooped in and dealt with this situation that had happened to his daughter. But instead of dealing with the situation, he put on a mask. And what did the mask say? Everything's fine here. Nothing to see over here. And in many cases, we learn this even as children. Your kids, if you live in a dysfunctional family right now, they've learned even at an early age how to put on a mask and pretend like everything is fine in the household. I'll give you a great example. My mom, now let me just say this. My mom watches us every Sunday, and I love my mama. Everybody say, hey, mama. Hey, mama. But I'm finna put her out here. Okay, listen. My mom, when I was in the 3rd grade, I had a teacher named Miss Mann. Now, I was like a little bit of a class clown, y'all. Just a little bit of a class clown. And so, I would make this joke, like, hey, y'all, this lady named Miss Mann, don't she kind of look like a man, right? That was my joke. So the lady, as you can imagine, she couldn't stand me. And so one day, she was fed up. She said, you know what? I'm calling your mama tonight. Now, on the inside, I was terrified. But on the outside, I said, call her, lady, call her. So when I got home, my mom at the time was going through some trauma of her own. And so rather than discipline, she took her trauma out on me. I don't know if you've been in that position before. You call it discipline, but in actuality, it's a little more abusive. It's a little bit more abusive, okay? It's a little bit more. And so, make a long story short, my mom disciplined me. Next day, I go back to school. I got scars all over my face, okay? I get back to school. Now, I love my mama now. Don't y'all do that. Don't 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 do that. We learn, we grow. You know better. Okay. So I go back to school, and the teacher was like, oh my God. I'm like, Miss Mann, you did this. You did this, Miss Mann. You did this. She said, can you step out in the hallway? So I stepped out in the hallway. She says, honey, is everything okay at home? Like, lady, nah, everything ain't at home. Good at home. You the one called her. Nah, everything ain't good at home. Shoot. That's why I told you not to call. Remember I said don't call her? That's why I said it, lady. So I said to her, yeah, everything's, ma'am, yes, ma'am, everything is, everything. Why? Because even as a child, I had learned, don't let anybody know about the dysfunction happening in the household. Everything's good, ma'am. She said, well, how did you get those scars on your face? I said, oh, these? I was playing with my cousins and I fell down the stairs and, I kind of got some scratches on. But, I'm good. Everything's good. She said, are you sure, honey? I said, oh, now I'm honey. When you come from a dysfunctional family, you learn you can't ever let anybody on the outside know the dysfunction that's happening on the inside of the house. And Satan says, yes. Because here's the reality. God oftentimes sends the rescue through other people. But if you learn never to tell other people that there's a problem, then you can never get the help you need. We see oftentimes in Scripture, Mark chapter 10, verse 51, where Jesus would ask people, hey, what can I do for you? Which when you think about it, is kind of crazy. Jesus is 100% man and 100% God. Do the math on that. As 100% God, he should automatically know what you need. Am I right or wrong? But yet he still asks, how can I help you? In fact, in this passage of Scripture we're going to read, he asked a blind man, how can I help you? It should be kind of obvious, Jesus, how you can help a blind man. I'm just saying. Look at what happens. Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked him. The blind man said, Rabbi, I want to see. Go, said Jesus, your faith has healed you. Immediately he received his sight and he followed Jesus along the road. In other words, in order for this man to get a miracle, God said, I first need you to acknowledge your need for the miracle. Amen. And the same is true when it comes to the dysfunction in your family. The first thing you have to do is say, God, I got a dysfunctional family and I need help. I need help to fix this. If you don't step in, we don't stand a chance. But as long as you put on a mask that says everything's all good, we're fine. You're never going to have a chance of having a functional family. Here's how I want to close today. This holiday season, it's November, Thanksgiving is coming up, and then we got Christmas. What I want to challenge you to do in this holiday season is I want to challenge you to break each one of the 4 rules that I showed you earlier. Don't talk about it. Don't trust. Don't rock the boat. Don't feel. Starting this holiday season, we're going to break the rules. Maybe as a kid, you weren't a rule breaker. Starting this season, we're going to break some rules, y'all. We're not going to allow dysfunction to become the norm in our family. Or maybe it's been the norm. We're not going to allow it to continue being the norm in our family. We're going to break the dysfunction. Here's how, real quick, here's how we break the dysfunction. You need to start, particularly with your immediate family, the people in your household. You need to start by creating a safe space for conversation. What does that mean? That means that your kids need to know that they can talk to you about anything. And maybe you would say, well, they already know. The question that I have for you is, how do they know? Did you tell them? Did you tell them you can come to me and you can talk to me about anything? Not only does it need to be a safe space where our kids can talk about anything, but if you're married, it needs to be a safe space where your spouse can talk to you about anything. I cannot tell you the number of couples that I counsel where one spouse musters up enough courage to share with the other spouse something that's happened to them, some trauma. Maybe it's a mistake that they made, an imperfection that they have, somewhere where they come up short. They muster up enough courage to share it, and the moment they share it, they get nothing but judgment from the other spouse. So then what does that teach the other person? It teaches the other person, this isn't a safe space. This is a place where we've got to maintain secrets. I told you that the devil loves dark spaces. And as long as you, in your marriage, don't allow your spouse to open up and share, what you're in essence doing is giving the enemy place to do what he wants to do in your marriage. So what are we going to do? This holiday season, we're going to break the first rule of don't talk about it by talking about it. We're going to talk about everything. We're going to pull the rug up, and we're going to deal with the dysfunction. All the stuff we've swept under the rug year after year after year, we're going to deal with that. Oh, Pastor, that just sounds a little uncomfortable. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable in the moment, but it's going to be uncomfortable to get you to a place of health. In fact, sometimes, in order for you to get to a better place, you've got to deal with the temporary discomfort. When you go to the dentist, no, it doesn't feel good, but it's good for you. When you go to the doctor to have surgery done, no, it doesn't feel good, but it's good for you. So yes, there's going to be temporary discomfort, but it's going to put your family in a much better place, and you're going to break the generational curse of dysfunction off of your family.